Happy Friday, everyone. Josh's severe weather, and we continue to monitor the tropics now that it is November. Oh, hey, by the way, if it's November, do you think it's too soon to put up your Christmas decorations? After all, Halloween is over, right? So, comment in the chat box if you think it's too early or not. We're going to wait personally a little bit longer. It's 80 degrees out today, so I can't even think about that. But anyway, I hope you all had a great October. Things have gone well, and now it's time to take a look again at another tropical threat in the Caribbean and eventually in the Gulf of Mexico as well. And I'm also going to talk about what's going on across the rest of the tropics worldwide. And we're going to take a look at more severe weather in the southern United States and central U.S. coming up here heading into next week. So very busy times, both in the tropics and in severe weather, and not so busy yet for winter, but that, of course, is coming in 1 month meteorologically. So thank you so much for joining me today. We are looking at likely future PADI forming sometime in the next few days over the southwestern Caribbean, and starting to see a little bit more agreement on where this system is going to end up going. There's still not agreement yet, though, on how strong it may get, but the waters of the Caribbean are very warm. So there is hurricane potential, but there's also a chance that it may not get to that strong either, depending on how it interacts here with Jamaica, Cuba, and even wind shear waiting for it in the Gulf of Mexico. But I would say at this point, I still think there's a pretty decent chance this could become a hurricane. I say it's very definitely going to be a tropical storm, and we may even have it becoming a depression here by Sunday. We also have a couple more systems we're going to track here that are coming in from the tropics across the islands and towards Puerto Rico. And these probably aren't going to be a big deal at this point, except for the amount of rain that is falling. We've had some flooding across Puerto Rico, and I'll actually show that to you on radar here in Puerto Rico. You can see flash flood warnings across the eastern portion of the island. Just a big tropical feed here, a bit of a circulation here as well, just to the northeast of the Dominican Republic, and as a result, we have some pretty heavy amounts of rain. And so whether or not a storm does form in this area, already up to about 4 or 5 inches of rain and quite a bit more coming. So those of you in Puerto Rico, do buckle up here as we're going to continue to deal with this heavy rainfall. For the rest of the tropics, you will see here just 3 areas that are in yellow at this point, all of which have a 30% chance or lower of developing in the next 48 hours. But if you click here on the 7-day, you will in fact see that this area in the southwestern Caribbean has been upgraded to a high chance of developing late this weekend and more likely early next week, Sunday night, Monday time frame. That is generally moving northward here. It's going to form here in a couple of days and move north towards Jamaica, maybe even the western tip of Haiti before turning back to the west. This area in red is where potentially it may form. So it's a large area where it may form. It's not going to impact that entire area directly, but as the area where it could form. And we do have 2 other areas that have a low chance, just 10% of development. One here that I think eventually, while it does impact Cuba and the Bahamas, eventually gets absorbed into this larger circulation, which would be PADI. And then we do have a non-tropical low, which may shed its cold front and briefly become subtropical near the Azores. But I'm not going to stress too much about this one here. It's not a huge threat. This one down here, though, does have the hurricane potential here in the longer term. So I talked about the rain here in Puerto Rico. There's a weak surface low right about in here, attached to what's left of a frontal boundary, which has been sitting here all week long. And the wind shear is very high. You can kind of see the wind shear taking our clouds and streaming them off to the north and east. And that is not favorable for development, but storms can still form with wind shear. They may not be as strong, but they can still form. Now, the area of greater concern is still very disorganized and very broad for the time being. And that, of course, is also due to the wind shear that we have here. But that is predicted to improve over the weekend. The wind shear should drop down, and we are going to see more consolidation of thunderstorms, which all of the modeling continues to show. In the Pacific, we are going to have to watch a few disturbances here, which are generally moving westward. Here's one of them, and here's another. Neither looks to be a threat to land at this point, but we certainly still need to keep an eye on those as well. Here's a closer look at the Southwest Caribbean, and you can actually see here there is a little bit of twisting here, a little bit of a broad circulation, but the center right about here to the east of Nicaragua, north of Panama, northeast of Costa Rica, it is not yet truly developed at this point. It's just starting to kind of set up the framework for what should be some development here over time. You can also see here a bit of a circulation in this direction here, mainly a mid-level circulation, and that will be moving into parts of Dominican Republic here near Punta Cana this afternoon, and eventually tracking in this general direction. And if it stays small and the wind shear does drop down more like it is expected to do, then it has a slight chance of becoming a depression or a storm. And I've talked about that for a while, but there's actually a system behind it that actually has a little bit better chance of developing. We're going to take a look at that right here. And you can see just a very tiny little naked swirl right in here, well to the east of the Windward Islands at this point. It's really nothing at this point, but once the wind shear that's over this area here does relax in a few days, it is something we need to also keep an eye on as it gets closer to the islands here next week. The reason I think that that's going to happen is if you look at the overall pattern, we're in a very favorable phase of what's called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, the MJO. And as that phase comes around now into phase 8, and especially into 1 and 2 right in here, mainly next week and beyond, we see more rising air on this side of the world than we do over on the Asian and Indian Ocean sides. That's where we were here several days ago. We were over in the Western Pacific. Now we're coming along full circle here. So a lot of divergence aloft, a lot of thunderstorm activity, and the wind shear should start to come down, especially across the Caribbean, and that all favors tropical activity. The other thing we've got to be looking at is water temperature. And I talk about this day in and day out, but it's not exactly cooling off quickly. With as warm as it's been here across the south all week, yes, water temperatures are slowly coming down due to the weaker sun angle that we're now heading into here for the rest of the year, but they're still warm enough for tropical activity anywhere in this zone here. It's still warm enough to support a tropical system, and this area in here is still warm enough to support a hurricane. So we are not totally yet ready to shut the door on tropical activity, albeit when we get closer to the northern Gulf Coast, it is a lot tougher for a hurricane to survive. So what I want to do is take you all here through the ensembles, the probabilities, and then the tracks of what may form here, or what will form, I should say. And you can see our chance for a tropical depression is still kind of low today, but it starts to climb tomorrow all the way up to 80%. And by the end of the weekend, 80 to 90% chance we have a tropical system down here. You can see eventually the turn to the north and then northwest. And the reason why is that we are going to have a big area of high pressure in here that forces everything more on this track here around it. That's going to block it from coming up through Cuba and hitting the Bahamas and coming up towards Bermuda. And instead, we'll send it near Cuba and generally speaking in this direction here. And by the end of next week, there's a possibility this system could be anywhere from here to even over here, but more than likely into the Gulf of Mexico. Beyond that, you can see our chances do come down. Florida would be more at risk than Texas at this point, but Mexico is equally at risk as well. So pretty good chance here that we have a tropical depression. Also a pretty good chance we have a tropical storm. Obviously not as high because it takes more to get to that point, but you'll see we may have a tropical storm here by Monday. This is Tuesday, this is Wednesday and Thursday, and then here's Friday and then Saturday. And more than likely, the stronger it is, the more likely it's going to go in this general direction. The weaker it is, the more it's going to try to get pulled northward. But that could still change. Here's a look at the upper level pattern. This is the GFS model from Tropical Tidbits. And let me reduce the size just a touch so you all can see. Right now you see this big region of high pressure stretching from Bermuda all the way down to the western Gulf of Mexico. That area is going to actually weaken just a little bit, but will still be in place over the southeastern United States. That's going to block this from escaping to the north and east. As that high continues to build a little bit to the right here to the east, that will allow this system to come up on the western side. And there's a big question mark as to what the timing of that ends up being, how strong the storm actually does get, because it needs to form first. So if this high is a little farther west, this storm is going to be more likely to continue west, maybe in the general direction of northeastern Mexico. But there's also a trough here moving into the western United States and very fast flow here. And the strength of the ridge determines how quickly that trough can move in here and how far south and east it gets. If the trough is stronger, this system is going to get pulled northeastward towards Florida. If it's weaker, then the system could take an extended trip across the Gulf next week. Here's a look at wind shear as well. This is pretty important. We've got quite a bit of it over the Caribbean here. This was yesterday. Here's today. And it does start to drop off here tomorrow, but it's still fairly high until we get to early next week. Now, as we get into Monday, you will see here, I'm circling an area where the wind shear is 20 knots or less, which would be favorable for development. This entire area here, low wind shear expected, much below average over the southern Gulf of Mexico. Now, as we take this on further into time, you will see that the wind shear continues to stay pretty low. It's lower than average in Florida, but it's not very low up there. It's really just low in the northwestern Caribbean. Once we get later into next week, whatever system we have, if it gets up to the edge of the blue here, it's already going to be encountering more hostile wind shear. And as a result, it's going to be a lot less likely to maintain strength. It would probably weaken over time. And you can see that here right along the Gulf Coast, extremely high wind shear, as you would expect this time of the year. The area in white indicates where it's average wind shear for early November. The area in red indicates above average, and the area in blue indicates below average wind shear. But you can have below average wind shear that is still significantly hostile wind shear. And I think that's going to be the case as we take a little bit of a closer look at the northern Gulf of Mexico. So I do want to load in some ensembles for you all to see some possible tracks here. We're seeing low pressure forming probably sometime on Sunday in this general area. Yes, there's the other low that we're going to watch here as well, but that may go away in a few days. And we see, generally speaking, threats towards Jamaica, southern Cuba, and maybe Haiti by Monday into Tuesday of next week. After that, we see several different ensemble solutions running the gamut here of crossing the Yucatan, going towards the Bay of Campeche, or coming up into the Central Gulf, or a weaker system heading towards the Florida Panhandle by next weekend. There's a lot of spread here still, so a lot can still change. Here's a look at the ensemble from the European model earlier today. And you can see here, it has some better developed potential down here in the Northwest Caribbean. It's got hurricane potential, but you can see there's still quite a bit of spread in where this may end up going. Now, if we look back at the 0Z, not a lot has changed, but you can see a lot more spread in our possibilities here. Anywhere from a tropical system coming up through the Florida Panhandle to a very weak system linking up with a front near Louisiana to maybe a stronger system surviving and going more westerly into Mexico. So yeah, a lot can still change here. I do want to show you the Canadian. I don't think, yep, I guess we're getting the 12Z in, but it's not fully in yet. This time next week, by the way, with the time change, I'm going to have an hour extra to look at things for you. So I'm actually get these videos done sooner. But here's the Canadian model ensemble, and you can see here several solutions carrying this system towards the Yucatan Channel. Some pull it quickly northeast towards Florida on Wednesday and Thursday. Others linger it in the Central Gulf Thursday into Friday, and just a lot of uncertainty. Oh, by the way, we may not be finished after this system here. You can see there's some possibilities down the road, but again, quite a bit of uncertainty at that point. Here's a European model from earlier, and this keeps our system fairly weak. The European still does not do a great job necessarily of developing these smaller systems. It has a very broad area of low pressure that never really gets too strong. Maybe it's a tropical storm moving into the Yucatan Channel here Wednesday night. But you can see because it stays weak, it generally drifts westward and even southwestward as this high blocks it from getting up to Florida, and this front blocks it from getting up to North Texas or to the upper coast of Texas and Louisiana. Here's the Canadian model. It looks different. It's looked different all along. It does have a developing tropical storm passing by just to the east of Jamaica, just south of Cuba here Monday evening, and then strengthening a little bit, but not nearly as much as what the models earlier had shown. It does have a tropical storm getting quickly absorbed into a faster trough that recurves towards the Big Bend of Florida Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, which has been a popular track for storms, but this is a lot weaker. So that is something to keep in mind. Yes, you don't want to see another storm, but at least this is not nearly as strong as what the Canadian from a few days ago showed. I can kind of show that to y'all here. Yeah, see a lot different here between 2 days. The Canadian was showing a big storm approaching Florida, but now it's not nearly as strong. However, we still have chances for it to become strong. The icon's not showing that. It is showing low pressure and a tropical storm probably on Tuesday, very close to the south coast of Cuba. But because it's right along that coast of Cuba, it never really gets the system to develop quickly. It's just struggling with wind shear and struggling with land. And as a result, we have a weak system that maybe heads up to the Florida Panhandle or Alabama, never even makes landfall, and actually gets killed by wind shear near the southeastern tip of Louisiana. You can see the next storm, by the way, behind it, we're going to have to keep an eye on. But then there's the GFS. There's always that one. And this one has done very poorly in staying consistent, but the GFS insists that we have a tropical storm on Sunday south of Jamaica, and it's strengthening coming up between Jamaica and Haiti as a hurricane Monday night into Tuesday. Do I think it's going to play out exactly this way? No, I don't. I think this will change. But I do want to remind folks from a couple weeks ago, remember tiny little Oscar? That became an 85-mile-per-hour hurricane. It was about the same size, and it didn't take long to get going once the wind shear dropped off and it organized it did get pretty much to this intensity. So it is definitely still possible. Now, beyond that, if we do have a hurricane and interacts with Cuba, it will weaken. But you can see that GFS lowers our steering currents. And as a result, we have a system that hovers in the Western Gulf and eventually drifts towards Texas as a much weaker system. By the way, it's got another system here following that Oscar track. But again, it's just sending some moisture into South Florida to the Bahamas and Cuba. It's not really a big threat. And then it's got some more action beyond it. We're going to be in a pretty active pattern here through the month of November. So just because this one doesn't necessarily go crazy doesn't mean we can't still have another system. Rainfall totals will be significantly high here over the Central Caribbean. We can see amounts of 15 to 25 inches of rain in parts of Haiti, which is very bad news. Over a foot potentially in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and the Virgin Islands. And yes, this is going off of the earlier track from the GFS showing significant rainfall in the Central Gulf, and that is a possibility as well. Let's take a look real quick at the rest of the tropics. Here's our disturbance, now up to 40%. We're up to yellow here. I haven't had a chance to look at the Hurricane Center, but take a look at this. This could be Patty, and everything we talked about just gets blown up. But you know what? We don't need to stress about it. It may grab a little name, a little whale fart, if you want to call it that. This area is still at 10%. And this is our broad area here, 70% over the next 7 days. Doesn't look great right now, but it's got some possibilities. In the Pacific, we're going to watch this area. We do have an invest, 40% chance that will fade before it hits Hawaii. In the Western Pacific, we have an invest south of Guam. Doesn't look like it's going to do much. And then our damaging storm here, Kangri, is much weaker, beginning to lose tropical characteristics. That moisture heads into southwest Japan tonight. And the remains will get linked up with the jet stream next week and will eventually play a factor in our weather here across North America in about 10 to 12 days. Speaking of North America, take a look at what's going on here. We've got a boundary which is slowly moving through the southeast, a lot quieter day today, much cooler weather for the northeast here after our hot temperatures yesterday. But we've got a very active pair of shortwave and longwave troughs moving through here. Here's one and here's the other. And these are going to send moisture in and lead to more active weather in the southwest today and across this portion of the country here as we get into the rest of the weekend and next week. And heavy rain is a potential threat, but severe weather also is a potential threat. Here's the GFS model showing you what the progression of how everything works out here. Strong high over the southeast, strong trough over the west. In between, we have fast wind flow. Very strong, what we call sting jet on the backside here of 100-knot belt of winds. And that is going to eventually send some pretty strong winds and wind shear into the plains here. So I think tornadoes are going to be a possibility as we get to the beginning of next week. Places like Oklahoma, Kansas, maybe Missouri, and Arkansas. And behind that, we see another massive trough, which eventually could bring some more active weather in for next weekend. We have a marginal risk for severe weather today, maybe some heavy rain over eastern New Mexico and West Texas. That threat starts to grow tomorrow as this begins to move out of the southwest. And then Sunday, a much bigger area that's under a slight risk. And this could get a bump depending on how things play out in Oklahoma, North Texas, and Kansas. On day 4, sorry, it's animating, that threat shifts farther east. It gets down to as close as Austin and College Station, Dallas, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Arkansas, Springfield, southeastern Kansas, even to the St. Louis area, at least a 15% chance of some severe weather. I'll show you the shorter term forecast and then we'll take a look at the longer term. But you can see storms are going to continue to blow up here this evening in West Texas. Some pretty heavy rain expected. Tomorrow, mainly staying north and west of the Metroplex during the daytime, but at night could get a little bit more active. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. But as we head into Sunday, you will see the evolution of more locally strong to severe storms popping up here. And I don't know yet exactly how this is going to play out, but do be prepared for quite a bit of rain and quite a bit of severe weather action across this region. A little bit farther north, I'll show that to you all as well. And you can see here just some rain breaking out tomorrow across Kansas, but there could be some lightning with some of this. And then more organized severe weather expected to start on Sunday and continue into Monday. You can kind of see how all that evolves here. So we'll have numerous warnings. Make sure you have a way of receiving those watches and warnings, especially if you have outdoor plans. The European shows you pretty nicely here how active we are going to see this complex of storms, and a little bit more like a springtime pattern than a fall time pattern. This is Sunday evening, and here's a look real quick at Monday, and you can see we're going to have lots of rain and lots of action during these days. We do have some excessive rain potential, not just in the southwest, but also in South Louisiana. Saw some pretty heavy rain in parts of St. Tammany Parish last night, over 9 inches in a few spots. That area is still at risk today, but tomorrow the area shifts from near Lubbock over to Wichita Falls, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, all the way up to near Kansas City, and an even greater threat for some heavy rain and flooding centered on Oklahoma and southwest Missouri here. And you can see our rain totals over the next several days are going to be significant here, especially in the south central United States here. And I will blow that up for you all real quick to be able to see. Officially, as much as 9 inches of rain in the Tulsa area over the next 7 days. 6 inches in OKC, 2 to 3 in the Metroplex, where we got our first rain of the month yesterday on the very last day, and maybe some heavy rain potential over parts of Louisiana and southeastern Texas. And I do want to take that northward a little bit to show you that we'll also have that heavy rain across much of the central part of the country. And into the Midwest, some needed rainfall moving into Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But where we really need it here in the mid-Atlantic states, we continue to suffer here through very dry weather. We'll get a little bit in the Carolinas, but not a lot. The mountains will not have flooding, but they will have some rain here next week. So as always, I'll keep you all updated on that, but I appreciate your time today. I hope everybody has a safe Friday. I'll be back here tomorrow. I'm taking Sunday off. Got a little family outing that day, but we'll keep you posted here as things evolve in the tropics. And as always, I want to give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I don't conform to what most scientists conform to and people in the work world. I talk about my faith because it drives me to bless other folks. And you may not feel that way, and that's perfectly fine. I was there where you were, if you don't believe what I believe, but I subscribe to the good book and I read it all the time. And Romans 12 tells us, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And that sacrifice is a tough one to make, but it is nothing compared to the sacrifice God made through his son, Jesus Christ. The sacrifice that allows us all to have hope of eternal life if we choose to believe that. So why would I want to conform to the world, which is not going to give me that promise, but instead be transformed and follow and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I think people forget about the perfect part of that, but nobody here on earth is perfect. The only person that's perfect is Jesus Christ. And with his will, we can live eternally with him and bless other folks. And all I ask is that don't give up the faith. You may be in a spot in your life where you are struggling mightily, and it's really hard for you to believe that God is good because all you've seen is evil. But I will say this. There are so many people, including the person who wrote this letter, Paul, who went through that. And at the end of the day, you only have a short amount of time on earth. What really matters is what happens next. And that's why I share what I share every day, because that's what truly matters. So I hope you all have a great Friday, and I'll be back to you tomorrow. God bless.